when you brought up the federal deficit at a Democratic caucus luncheon on Tuesday, you were booed.
I'm not sure.
You were booed.
I heard a lot of no's. I don't know if it maybe is boo no or no boo or something.
Well, Senator Joe Manchin certainly deserves the boos because he's starting to make it more and more clear that he is not necessarily going to vote in favor of the Senate reconciliation bill on infrastructure. That's the $3.5 trillion bill that includes all of the agenda items that both the Biden administration and congressional Democrats claim they want to champion, that they want to pass. But unfortunately, corporate Democrats are standing in the way. Joe Manchin happens to be one of them. Now, Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and Jon Tester have expressed concerns that the go it alone plan, and of course, their concerns about the go it alone plan means they're concerned about the reconciliation version of the plan, which can pass with a simple majority in the Senate. Manchin said he supported what the plan entailed, but was concerned about the price tag. And Sinema's spokesperson said the senator would give the package, quote, careful consideration. Jon Tester told CNN the price tag was a, quote, big amount, but he wasn't ruling anything out. And so the real question is, what are Democrats planning to do? We need to be clear about what Manchin is cooking up, but more importantly, what are progressives planning to do to fight back? And what are they doing with the leverage they have in the House? Before we get to the progressive Democrats, let's hear more from Manchin in this next video.
Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who is one of the other moderates among Democrats in the Senate, she made headlines this week saying that a $3.5 trillion bill is too big for her to support. Now, I know you've said you're keeping an open mind. But you've previously said you're concerned about the debt and inflation. You've suggested you could back $2 trillion. Would you prefer this bill be smaller?
Well, let me just say this out of respect for all of my colleagues who've worked so hard, and I respect them too. Hopefully they respect us for what we've been doing. The more moderate group or conservative group of the Democratic Party. But with that, you have to have a blend. So where they are right now, everyone should be concerned about debt. We're at almost $28.6 trillion of debt. And our debt goes up $4 billion a day. If you're sleeping, if it's a weekend, whatever, it goes up $4 billion a day. Someone should be concerned about getting your financial house in order. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about inflation. But with that, we're gonna pay for it. So let's see what to pay for is if they're real. Let's see if the tax adjustments we're gonna make, I didn't vote for the 2017. I thought it was weighted to the wrong side. So if we make some adjustments, are we gonna go overboard and make ourselves non-competitive? I wouldn't be for that.
Yeah, I'm sure Joe Manchin is really concerned about the debt. He doesn't ever mention what the Federal Reserve is doing in keeping interest rates artificially low, which of course contributes substantially to inflation. Never ever mentions that. I'm sure that his own personal financial investments in dirty coal in the state of West Virginia has nothing to do with the fact that he's opposed to the reconciliation version of the infrastructure bill. I'm sure that this is all about good faith concern, Cenk, about the federal deficit. Because Manchin was concerned about the deficit throughout the 4 years of the Trump administration. He was constantly like ringing the alarm about it. No, let's keep it real. Let's stop pretending like this is a good faith argument. We know about his financial investments. We know that he's looking out for his own profit motives. This is not about the federal debt or the deficit. He does not care about that at all. And reporters need to be clear about that when they're interviewing him and when they're covering the story.
Okay, I'm gonna put on the decoder ring in a second, but first, let me just say, it isn't just about Manchin. It's all the politicians and all the media. So during the 4 years of Trump, we almost never heard about the debt or the deficit. Remember, they passed $2 trillion worth of tax cuts for the rich and for multinational corporations. Nobody talked about inflation. Remember anybody talking about? No, there wasn't, right? And did anybody talk about debt and deficit? No, all of a sudden we're counting down to the day how much we're spending, and there's a Democrat out there telling everybody, you better panic about the debt and the deficit. You didn't need to panic under Trump, but you need to panic now. But it's not just about Trump, it's not Democrats and Republicans. Remember here, the corporate Democrats and Republicans agree, and the corporate media agrees. So when they did $4 trillion through the Fed for COVID relief for businesses, for large businesses, let alone the trillions they put in for large businesses through legislation, there was no talk of inflation. You're telling me that the Fed is gonna print trillions of dollars, and at that point you're not concerned about inflation? That now you're concerned about inflation when we would actually create real jobs for average Americans. Now, when it helps average Americans, all of a sudden they're all concerned about inflation. When the Fed is printing money and handing it to the banks and handing it to corporations, trillions of dollars at a time, not a peep about inflation or anything else. Guys, the hypocrisy is obvious. Every day these guys look like they're trying their hardest to prove Noam Chomsky right. It's all about manufacturing consent, okay? And so in this case, let's put on the decoder ring and now decode what Manchin is saying. We just told you about debt. And we just told you about inflation. So when he says inflation, that means business interests are not as interested in this. Okay, we took all the money, us and our donors, and now we don't want higher wages. Sometimes we don't necessarily even want higher jobs. But most importantly, we don't want clean energy replacing dirty energy.
Exactly, because Manchin, remember, a story that we covered just last week, Manchin makes $500,000 a year off of his personal investment in dirty coal in the state of West Virginia. He makes more than double his congressional salary off dirty coal in the state of West Virginia. That's what this is about. And of course, listening to what his corporate donors want him to do, like a good boy. He's just being a good boy for his corporate donors. That's who Manchin is, and don't forget it.
And finally, the last thing to decode is when he says that are we going to go overboard? In other words, no, when it comes to helping average Americans, cut, and make ourselves non-competitive. That's business lingo. For, you know what, if we start actually, holding corporations accountable or helping new industries, not old industries, I'm gonna say, all of a sudden we're not competitive. It's the oldest trick in the book. And then, but they might have to move jobs abroad. They might have to move jobs out if we're non-competitive. It's a threat. He's threatening your job. You better get back in line and do exactly what the corporations tell you. Meanwhile, we told you last week in a separate story, Joe Manchin is not doing anything about outsourced jobs from West Virginia, from Mylan, the company that's in West Virginia, and well, it might have something to do with his daughter getting a $30 million golden parachute for selling off that company to a company that's gonna outsource all those jobs in West Virginia. So when it comes to actual jobs, he doesn't give a damn about being competitive or non-competitive. This is all a scam to help the ruling class with what they want. And him saying, the pay-fors, they have to be real. Even in his bipartisan version, they're not real at all. You know why? Because Biden, at least half-heartedly, and the Democrats half-heartedly, said that they wanted this infrastructure bill paid for by raising taxes on the wealthy and corporations, not by the whole amount that Trump cut taxes. Biden was arguing for about half, then a quarter, and now it's down to zero. You want to pay for it, Manchin? It's easy. Let's tax your corporate buddies. Oh, you don't want that? You actually did agree with Trump, didn't you? Right? Yeah, it's because of your corruption. Were any of those questions brought up or asked during the interview? Of course not. It's corporate media. They played along with the kabuki theater. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.